Hi, I'm Laurie Wehring, and you're listening to Art Talks, the podcast bringing you news about the New Braunfels and Seguin arts industries during this COVID-19 pandemic. Each week, we'll feature Jason Irle, Executive Director of the Mid-Texas Symphony, Cheryl Fisher, Executive Director at the Braunfels Theater, and we'll feature special guests representing local arts organizations to share how they are being affected and some messages of positivity. This is part 2 of a 2-podcast series featuring Akiko Fujimoto, music director at the Mid-Texas Symphony. Our last session focused on how the virus is affecting the orchestral music industry. During this session, we're talking with Akiko about her personal journey as a musician and conductor. Cheryl, why don't you kick off the questions?
Well, speaking of that, I want to dig into a little bit of when did you know you wanted to be an orchestral music director?
Sure. It's interesting you say specifically orchestral because I started out conducting choirs, although I was playing the trombone growing up and playing in youth ensembles and bands and orchestra. I was also a choir kid, and this is when I got my first taste of conducting. So I would say the orchestral part really happened in college. The symphonic repertoire, as much as I love singing in choirs and playing in wind ensembles, the symphonic repertoire, it was the kicker for me. Just the depth and the breadth of the repertoire. And I just love orchestras as a thing. I think it's so interesting. It has so many different instruments with so many personalities, and at a very high level of virtuosity required to execute. And I think we all know, it's so exciting to put together a large group of talented people to do something, to pull off something huge. And it takes a lot of resources to put it on, but also the reward is greater. It's just so dynamic. And we can play such a large range of dynamics and colors and tell a lot of stories. Speaking of Scheherazade and such, I feel like the symphony orchestra is one of the most powerful things there are on, the planet. And I love conducting them because that's my instrument. That's how I communicate. That's how I make music. I don't make a sound except for when I'm grunting or something on the podium. But, I, in a silent way, and using vision or, hand gestures and words, I get to make music too and do it in the moment with the musicians. So I got hooked on it, I think, when I started to do more and more of it in college.
Tell us about that first concert with an orchestra.
I think the first time was, actually, it was the piece that kicked off our String Fever concert this past February, Grieg's Holberg Suite. And my mentor in college gave me an opportunity to conduct it in public. And I just did it. I did my best. I think it went well. Innocence is bliss. When you know nothing, everything feels great. And so I thought I had a triumphant time. And I think that was my first shot. But the interesting thing was there was a recording by Moscow soloists led by a very famous violist, Yuri Bashmet, that I was listening to. I was heavily influenced by, I thought, because I loved their performance and I still love their performance, the recording of that piece. And I remember after my live performance with my group, I went back and listened to it thinking, oh, I'm sure I was doing it just like them because I was kind of brainwashed by listening to them, which you're not really supposed to do when you're learning a new piece. And I was struck by how different the pacing was and the, phrasing and all that. And then I thought, until then, I never really thought about how music sounds when it comes out of me, when I'm leading it. And then I just realized that it can't help but be colored by me, even if I'm not trying to make it my piece. And then I think that's when I realized, wow, I guess I have my own thought and my own way of doing things. And that seems very silly coming from a conductor. But when I started, I really was so innocent, and I just liked the physical act of making music that way.
So who is your favorite composer and or symphony to conduct?
I get asked that a lot, and I don't have a favorite because I love too many of them. I would say every time I'm really getting into a piece, I feel like that's the piece that I'm most in love with. Unless it's a piece that I really didn't know before, and I'm conducting it no matter what it sounds like it's it's a world premiere. There's no recording before, there's no precedence, and it's not famous or anything, but I'm doing it because situationally, that's what we're doing. Or we wanted to commission a new composer, whatever the reason is, or the occasion. And then I go in with no, preconceived ideas about liking or not liking. I'm just focused on making it happen. But I think with all standard works that have stood the test of time, I always find something to fall in love with. And it's kind of like getting to know a person. When you're studying a new piece, new score, you open it, and of course you chose it because you like this composer enough, or this piece is great enough to be programmed. And then once you really get into it, you are reminded what makes this piece so great. And then so you start to really kind of become one with it. And then you start to formulate your own ideas and thoughts and interpretation. And so it sounds like I'm having an affair with multiple composers and pieces, but I think that's really the way we are. All of us are. That our job is to really fall in love with that composer and piece at the time. And then that's why I do try to read the biography of whoever the composer is, especially if it's a historically famous established person. There's usually a lot of writing about them, and books and articles, and even living, composers these days with the internet, you can Google them and find a lot of interviews that they did. And I do this with famous conductors too, that are still living or that have lived recently, because there are a lot of videos where they're being interviewed, and it's interesting to hear their take on conducting or certain pieces. So yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a single answer to either of those questions, but I know that come this September, it'll be Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade and Joan Towers' Fanfare for the Uncommon Woman. And we're also doing a beautiful oboe concerto with our principal oboist, Jennifer Berg, and by Marcello, a Baroque piece. So those will be my favorite around the middle of September.
Exciting. Well, I have a big question. You've worked with orchestras like the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra, Canada's National Arts Centre Orchestra, the National Symphony Orchestra at the Kennedy Center, as well as the San Antonio Symphony and many others. What was it about the Mid-Texas Symphony that interests you in auditioning for a music director?
Well, the Mid-Texas Symphony, I can't say we go way back, but I would say it was one of the first organizations outside of the San Antonio Symphony that I got to know, because my first year, I think, at the San Antonio Symphony as an assistant conductor, I think I got asked to judge the Young Artist Competition or be one of the judges or something like that. And I remember, thinking, oh, there's this orchestra about 45 minutes from here, but I really didn't know anything about it. And then, of course, a lot of people in San Antonio would still talk about Dave Mars because he was their associate conductor or resident conductor way before me. So everybody knows Dave in San Antonio. So I would hear Dave Mars' name. And then a lot of my colleagues in the symphony were playing with the Mid-Texas Symphony. So Mid-Texas Symphony was always hovering above my head, in my consciousness since I arrived in South Texas. And when I heard that Dave was vacating the position, I had just gotten the job in Minnesota. So I was moving away from the area. And then I was so busy with that transition, I left and I thought, wow, I wonder what they're going to do, or when, and then somebody forwarded me the job announcement while I was in Minnesota. And it looked like I did not have to live there year round. So it was something I could do remotely when there are no concerts. And then when there are concerts, I could be there for 5-6 weeks. So all of these factors, and the fact that I know so many of the musicians already from the Mid-Texas Symphony because of San Antonio or other area orchestras that I had guest conducted by then, it kind of all came together. And I said, I have to apply. I have to, try at least. Also, I was very interested in the job in that I was ready for a music director position because my positions with San Antonio and Minnesota were staff conductor positions, which are very different from music director positions. So it's a different kind of responsibility. It's a different job description, even though we're all conductors. So I was ready for something new while I was still doing, the staff conductor positions. So I think it was just a very attractive proposition to me. So I had to apply. And I'll add one more thing. I did go to a Mid-Texas Symphony concert once because a friend of mine who plays in it invited me. And so I went, and I just noticed, like when I walked in the lobby, there were patrons coming and going. And of course, on stage, Dave was talking and the musicians were performing, and it just had this really amazing, warm atmosphere, sense of community. And I thought, that's a really nice place. I just had this positive impression from that concert that it was a very community-oriented, warm, supportive environment. So I had a very good impression about the organization.
Well, speaking of Dave Mars, he was a music director at the Mid-Texas Symphony for 22 years. What was it like coming into the orchestra following him?
Well, it's a great honor and responsibility, and I'm so glad that he's our conductor emeritus now, and he's coming back to guest conduct this next season. Dave is an institution in South Texas, even though he hasn't lived there for some time now. Between his positions in San Antonio and Yosa, before that or after that, I'm not sure, but I know he held multiple positions, and he taught at an arts magnet school, I think, in San Antonio and Mid-Texas Symphony. So he's an institution. He's beloved. And especially with the Mid-Texas Symphony community, I know many of the musicians felt that he was so supportive of them and appreciative of them. One friend of mine said, I play for them because Dave just makes us feel so supported and good. And so knowing that, of course, I admire Dave so much. Well before this position became open, we met because of the young artist thing, and also we were both speakers at the same conference at TLU. So our paths had crossed, and he gave me his contact info and let me know if you ever need me. And then, he was so generous with me when I was struggling with things in my career, and I would call him and just consult, just because I knew he used to be in my position at the symphony in San Antonio. And so he could relate, and he was so kind. And so I would say, just knowing all of this about Dave, it kind of set a high bar for how a music director should be. And I know I'm nothing like Dave. We're very different people and conductors, and we're both proud of our differences. And of course, he's way more experienced than I am. But, I think there are certain things, even though, conducting is it's a solo sport. We're all loners and we all do our own thing, and we are who we are. But I think there are many people in the industry that you admire, whether it's because of this or that they do or they are. And I think Dave is one of the people I admire because of who he is and how he treats people. So although I can never be him, and I don't do things like he does, I hope that there's an element that of his legacy that I can continue, which is how he made people feel.
I know, after, of course, being with the symphony for a number of years, it is exactly as you say. When you come in, It is a warm feeling from the time you walk into the lobby till throughout the concert. And having been to a concert since you've been conducting, it's a lot of fun to watch you conduct and to be a part of that experience. And so glad you're there personally. That's my personal thoughts. But one of the things that I've always loved about the symphony, and many symphonies do this, but they have children's concerts to expose students to classical music. Because as we know, most youth do not have that opportunity these days. What would you say to encourage parents to introduce classical music to their children?
I would say we can never replace the classroom music teachers. We can never replace the teachers of your group lessons or private teachers on your instruments. But as a professional orchestra, we are here for all the families as a resource. Of course, first, as a performing organization, we hope you come to our concerts, whether the kids' concerts with the teachers or just to our Sunday afternoon concerts. We do perform our main stage concerts at a very accessible time for everybody in the family. So we hope you bring your kids. And I hope they will also look to us as a resource where a high artistic standard is upheld because of the professional musicians we employ and feature. And we hope that we will be sort of a banner for what humanity can accomplish when we come together, that it's thanks to and because of internet, we have all become really good at doing things alone. And right now it's really wonderful because we can all stay home and go on Zoom and have meetings. And, there are those wonderful videos of orchestras playing through Zoom and somebody editing it so that they're all together, and synced up. But the act of a large group of people coming together to reach a same goal, whether it's sports or music, I think it's something that is becoming more and more precious in our society as technology advances. And I hope that the parents and families will see a live symphonic experience as one of the very rare occasions where you can expose your children to that kind of activity and that excitement that it creates in person, like right there. You can feel the heat from the stage and through the sound. It's also very ephemeral, unless you videotape a performance, you hire a camera crew and videotape it and stuff. Unless you do that, it's gone. And every sound that we produce is gone and the concert is over and we move on to the next concert. So it's very ephemeral, but I think you don't forget the feeling that you got from the performance. A patron in the San Antonio Symphony once told me, and I'll never forget, she said this, she said, Akiko, I might forget the name of the composer or the name of the piece or even the name of the, soloist or who was playing that day. I might forget that, but I never forget the feeling I got from the performance. And I thought, that's it. We are creators of a feeling. And many feelings. And it just takes a lot of us to do it. And I'm not just talking about people on stage, I'm people behind the stage, the crew and staff and the board and the audience. It takes everybody to share in that energy. But I hope that families will always look to us as the creator of that live energy and feeling. That mass-produced, and I mean that. By that I mean a lot of people, not mass-produced like cookie cutter. But I hope the parents will see us as one of the few things remaining in society where they can expose their kids to that.
All right, I just have one more question, and that is, what would you say to listeners who have never attended a concert as to why they should consider attending one this next season?
Oh, well, you can refer back to my last answer for one of my answers, if that live performance and the live, feeling experience that I hope people of all ages would share, whatever your background is. And for people who may not have gone to a lot of orchestra concerts before, I would say the feelings that we're trying to create through these compositions and performances are the same feelings that everybody feels. They're very universal feelings. I mentioned, courage and bravery when I was talking about Scheherazade and the fanfare for the uncommon woman. And I think those are feelings that we all feel, or we all want to feel, especially at a time like this. And, by the time the next season rolls around, our spirits might be weakened by this pandemic, and we might all need to be lifted up a little bit more than usual. So I really hope our patrons and, new and old returning will come experience live symphonic music because we're going to need it. We're going to need that feeling of connection with each other. So I think we were already proud of the season, before the pandemic happened. But I think we're even more proud of how powerful that whole season turned out to be, and uplifting and dynamic. So I hope everyone will come, and you don't have to be or dress like anything. You just come and you participate by listening.
Well, I just want to encourage anyone that's never been to a concert or a Mid-Texas Symphony concert to, if you just pick one and try it again. Try it 3 times before you make a judgment on it. If you've never been to an orchestral performance, it's just like Akiko says, it's how it transforms how you feel. And it's all positive, and we're all going to need it. And I think you're right, Akiko. Everyone is going to be hungry for the arts.
Thanks so much, Akiko, for spending so much time with us and talking about your journey. I'm personally so excited for September and plan to be there at the opening with my family. Thank you, Jason and Cheryl, and our listeners for joining us for Art Talks. We'll be posting new episodes weekly on Thursdays featuring local arts organizations. If you have any questions, you can email us at arttalks@mtsymphony.org. Thanks again for listening, and we'll be back next week.